Oh, I mean, everything. Reading is the first door that opens really to the outside world for anybody. I mean, I was born and raised on a farm, and we were 7 miles from town, dirt, muddy roads, and all my neighborhood friends were black, and there was very rigid demarcation between what you could do and what you couldn't do. I was a lonely child. I had 3 sisters, and they couldn't stand me, and with good reason. But reading was such a great release, and my mother always saw that we had books in the house, and I read Robinson Crusoe as a child. My first book that I owned myself, I was in the 3rd grade, and Santa Claus brought me a secondhand. This was in the Depression. It was a secondhand copy of Horatio Alger's "The Cash Boy" or "Paddle Your Own Canoe," and I teased on Gene Stratton Porter. And as I got a little more age on me, and I was very adept at reading. I learned to read early, and I graduated then into Twain and Dickens, and I mean, it transports you. It opens all these doors to you.
How does that help you? Oh, it's on my lap.
Okay.
That's not a good place for it. Sorry about that. Is it a little better there, Ken?
On that channel, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Now, how has reading helped you, and you went into the medical profession, how has reading fiction and things like that helped you as a communicator in medicine?
Well, I listen. Everybody has a story, and most of them are really anxious to tell it, and you've got the time and the patience, and as you get more adept at this, it doesn't take as much of either to draw the story out.
So your first skills were as a communicator in speech, because you came to writing much later.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about the transition from you're a doctor, you're doing family practice, and you have intimacy with people talking and things, but when do you sit down and write?
I don't know how I did all that. I really don't. I don't know how my wife and I, who is also a physician, I don't know how we did the things medically that we did in the era in which we evolved together. But it was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week passion. It wasn't just a job. Medicine is not a job. At least it didn't used to be. But you develop this business of looking at people, and you listen to what they're saying, but sometimes not what they're saying with their mouth is not what they're saying with their eyes. And I listen with my eyes as well as I do my ears. And I learned to do this early.
I'm reading your work. When you're in a room, you look around the room, and you help your reader see things around the room and still leaving some room for their imagination.
Yes. Good preachers do that. Good preachers don't beat you over the head with a sermon and yell and rant, and they end a sermon with something that leaves you walking out of the church saying, whoa, what did he mean by that? They make you think.
1980, you sit down to write. Is it a quick decision, or because your books certainly are?
It was a labor decision. I had been told when I was a freshman at Mercer University by my English professor, whom I idolized. I was scared to death of him, but he was a classical stuffed shirt professor, but God knows he was excellent. And he laid down that I had him for composition and rhetoric my freshman year at Mercer for 2 quarters. And he had us writing themes twice a week. You did one on Wednesdays in class, and then you had to prepare a longer theme over the weekends, always picking a title from a list that he had put on the blackboard. And he had these cardinal rules that he laid down. Write about what you know. Write with clarity. Don't be trite. Write correctly. If you make one comma fault in a theme, it's an automatic F. And it was a rigorous discipline. Probably the most disciplined study that I had had up to that point. I mean, when you're in high school, you know, everybody knows you. There were 30 people in my high school graduating class. It was easy to excel there. Most of them were farm boys who didn't give a flip. You know, what good's algebra going to do me? And this was a discipline that I had to make myself do, and he taught me to do this. And I didn't write anything. He told me when I left his class, he said, I have a feeling, I don't tell many students this, but I have a feeling that if you ever decided not to go into medicine, that you could make a living writing. Well, all my years of this kind of burned like a coal in my chest. And finally, when I was 58, I began to have intimations of mortality. And I decided if I was ever going to write, I better get cracking. And it was very labored. I had to make myself do it. And I was very busy practicing medicine. But the one time that I had to myself, all the kids were grown and gone. And as I said, I was raised on a farm. I was used to getting up before day to go and milk the cows. And I'd get up before day and write for a couple of hours before I woke my wife up. And it's amazing how much you can turn out. But I made myself write. I wrote 70 pages, and it was awful. I read it over, like you said, where did all those adverbs come from? What would Dr. Jones have said about this? And I tore it up and started over. And the more I wrote, the easier it came, and the more fun it became. And I started describing things that I hadn't really and truly thought about for years, like the smell, the musty smell of mouse nests in the gear room at the barn when you're getting the harness out for the mules. And I've had people comment on that. I had forgotten about that smell, and it's fun.
Who is your reader? Who are you writing for?
Me.
And we talked about that, so tell me about that again.
Naomi. I told you about the black lady.
But the microphone doesn't know, so tell us.
Oh, okay. Naomi was a black lady in Ferrol who was a product of the segregated schools in that county, and she had finished the high school there, which probably amounted to her getting the equivalent of a 9th grade education in the white schools. And she had lost her accent. She did not speak in dialect. In fact, she challenged me about it. She said that I had written dialect better than anyone she had read. But she didn't use dialect. But she was a voracious reader and a good friend of mine and a patient. And she came to me about 6 months after Run with the Horseman was first published and said to me, who do you write for? And I said, what do you mean, Naomi? And she said, well, I read everything I can get my hands on. And I always, when I read, I try to get in the author's mind and see what he or she is writing about and where they're coming from. And so when you wrote Run with the Horseman, you wrote that book for yourself. I could tell by reading it. You wrote it for yourself. You didn't know whether anybody else was going to read it or like it or not. And said, now you're famous. Now you have fans. And I want to ask you something. Are you writing again? Are you writing another book? I said, well, yes, as a matter of fact, I've started another book, a sequel to Run with Horsemen. And she said, and who you writing this one for? You got fans now. You never had fans before. You writing for your fans? And I said, Naomi, I hadn't stopped to think about it. She said, well, don't write for your fans, because you'll please some of them and you won't please others. Keep on writing just for yourself. And I've never had any advice from professionals in the writing profession that gave me anything that has really stirred me more than that.
You opened one of your books with the line, "Remember who you are."
Yes.
Well, the importance, that is a defining thing in you, isn't it? As
Yeah.
far as a statement as when Dr. Stone said, "Remember to be astonished."
Yes.
Is it similar to you, that statement?
Yeah. If you lose your sense of awe, or if you lose your sense of the ridiculous, you've fallen into a terrible pit. The only thing that's worse is never to have had either.
And I would end there, but I want to ask about Porter.
Right?
I went through college with Ayn Rand books saying, "Who is John Galt?"
Yes.
Okay, who is
Ayn
Porter?
Rand.
All right, who's Porter?
Well, Porter.
Who is Porter?
I'm Porter. I'm the character in nearly every book I've written. I'm a character in some of the stories I've written, strongly disguised, but it comes from inside me. I identify with nearly all of them.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you, if you could pick up the telephone and you could say to the world, the legacy that I want to instill in you? And I'll tell you what I enjoy. I enjoy your wit, I enjoy your storytelling, and I enjoy learning something from what I read. And when you took me through Emory campus and things like that, that was a joy. I honestly got back to step back before World War II and get a sense of what it was like for a medical student, not having to go to war and saying I should go to war, but father saying you need to go to medical school. What is the message that you would like to be your legacy for people?
I hadn't thought about it.
I know that's a hard question, and it's a curveball in this, and it's a continuing message. I see.
Well, Jim Minner, who was a friend of mine, and was one of the first people to read my first book, and when the second book came out, which was a story about Porter Osborne's experience in college, and Jim Minner read it, and I said, "Jim, what do you think of this?" And he said, "All the way through it, I thank God that I was a Methodist and not gone to a Baptist school, and that I had gone to the University of Georgia. I don't believe I could have survived that sort of environment." But they have chosen that book as compulsory reading for anyone who matriculates at Mercer University for the last 14 years. They have to read that book. Yeah, and it's really a story about the college. You haven't read that one yet. My editor, Chuck Perry, was going over it with it. And an editor's job, a good editor's job, is to protect an author from himself. I mean, if the author can't write correctly in the first place, he doesn't need an editor. He's got no business having one. He has no business being published. But it's the editor's job to protect an author from himself, from falling in love with a favorite line or something, to the exclusion of reality. And Chuck was having a terrible time about the shoebox episode in Whisper of the River. And I said, he wanted me to delete it. And I said, "Chuck, that's a wonderful story. Why are you wanting that out of there?" I said, "It really happened just the way it's written." He said, "Well, your facts are getting in the way of your fiction." And I said, "Why do you object to it?" And he said, "I just can't imagine my hero being involved with anything as repulsive as a box of feces." And I said, "Porter Osborne's not the hero of that book." And he said, "He's not." And this guy's read it 3 times. We've gone over it, page by page, chapter by chapter. And I said, "Who do you think he is?" He said, "Boston Harbor Jones." I said, "No." Tiny Yeomans? No. Not Miss Raleigh. I said, "No." Who is the hero? I said, "The hero of the book is Willingham University," which was a loose name for Mercer. And Kirby Godsey, who was president of Mercer, when he read the book, picked up on it immediately. that this is a tribute to what a college can do for a pencil neck geek that came off the farm.